Welcome back to the Sunday to Society podcast. I'm your host, Riley, where we help you go from the pews to the public square. We release new episodes every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific on your favorite podcasting apps like Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, as well as YouTube. And I want to take a moment here at the very beginning to thank you for a successful podcasting launch. We had a great reception, as well as great numbers for our first couple of episodes, and so I want to thank you for that. We reached 3 countries, the United States, Mexico, and Japan. The topic I want to cover this week, and if you haven't heard already, is the Catholic Church electing a new pope. But the topic that I really want to explore is how does this matter, or does this matter, to someone who's not a part of the Catholic Church? So let's jump right into this week's topic. Before we do that, I want us to look at some stats on the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has been around for a very long time. In fact, if you ask a Catholic when the start of the Catholic Church was, they would say it started with Peter as being their first pope. At the end of 2023, the global Catholic population reached approximately 1.4 billion people, which is an increase of a little over 1.25% from the previous year. The large majority of these people who are Catholic live in the Americas, specifically Central and South America. This is a very, very large number. I mean, almost 1.5 billion people consider themselves Catholic, or almost 1 out of every 5 people consider themselves to be a Catholic. So in the election of a new pope, this affects a lot of people around the world. This very large number of the Catholic Church includes people who have attended a Catholic church and have been baptized and have taken the sacraments. With this affecting 17% of the entire world's population, the eyes of the world are now being turned to the Vatican as the College of Cardinals and Bishops elect a new pope. This affects you especially if you live in a predominantly Catholic part of the world or part of a country where many people are Catholic. But before we jump into how does this affect somebody as a non-Catholic person, I want us to firstly take a look at what the entire process of electing a new pope. Pope Francis died on the Monday following Easter, April 21st, 2025. And once he was officially pronounced dead, the death rites of the pope were performed. Once these were performed, a mourning period of 15 to 20 days is enacted for the pope to be laid in his final resting place, a place of his choosing. This conclave starts 16 days after the pope's death. By the time this podcast is released, they will have probably already chose a new pope, but at the time of recording, the papal conclave kicks off in just a couple of hours in the Vatican. So this 15 to 20 days of mourning period allows the cardinals to make travel arrangements to the Vatican, as well as have a time of mourning and grieving, and a time to gather their thoughts and to pray for wisdom as they begin to think about and eventually elect a brand new pope. The cardinals come from all around the world and gather themselves together at St. Peter's Basilica, where they will gather in the Sistine Chapel to elect this new pope. There are a total of 252 cardinals that make up the College of Cardinals. However, only 135 of them are voting members. For a cardinal to be a voting member, they have to be under the age of 80, which was a limit set by Pope Paul VI in 1970 to ensure a more active and capable electorate for the papal succession, and to reduce the influence of an elderly age on the voting process. However, of these 135, 2 of them, who are under the age of 80, have opted not to vote during this papal conclave because of personal health issues. So 133 different voting members will vote in the election of this new pope. The voting starts by having one round on Wednesday, following by 4 votes each following day, 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. And then at the end of 3 days, if the cardinals have not successfully elected a new pope, Then they will take a day to rest, reflect, and pray, and then go and vote again for 3 more days, 4 votes each day. And the process just repeats until somebody has gotten a 2/3 majority to become the new pope. Previous papal conclaves have been decided within 2 or 3 days. If somebody does not get 2/3 of the majority vote, the ballots are burned with a special chemical that produces black smoke so that the people who are waiting outside of this basilica, it signifies to them that the cardinals have not secured a 2/3 majority on electing a new pope. This process repeats over and over and over again until somebody has received a 2/3 majority and elected a new pope. When there has been a 2/3 majority, the ballots are then burned with a different chemical, which burns off a white smoke, signaling to the people on the outside that a new pope has been elected. When the new pope is elected, he is asked if he accepts these responsibilities. If he does, he's then dressed in the papal garments and then presented to the people out front of the basilica as the new pope. This entire process has virtually been changed very little over the last 800 years. The shortest conclave took only 10 hours in 1503, and the longest conclave took almost 3 years when the cardinals were locked into a room until they could reach a decision. In fact, they even removed the roof so that they could speed up the process and they would be exposed to the elements. And eventually, in September of 1271, they elected Pope Gregory X. However, these recent papal conclaves have only lasted 2 to 3 or maybe 4 days. So it's hard to tell exactly how long the papal conclave will take place. The word conclave translates to under lock and key. And so the cardinals will assemble from around the world. They will not have access to their phones, no access to the internet. Essentially, they are locked out of everything in the outside world to prevent any type of outside influence in choosing the new pope. So as you can tell from the number and the seriousness of it all, that this election of a new pope is very important to the Catholics. Because to the Catholics, the pope is the vicar of Christ on earth, or the mouthpiece of Christ. And so the pope has a tremendous amount of power over the Catholic Church. I mean, he is the leader after all. And when the Catholic Church has a size of 1.4 billion people in it, this election of a new pope is quite a big deal for them, because the pope is the one who makes decisions over this very large church, influencing people's moral authority. But beyond these spiritual matters and making decisions for the church, beyond these spiritual matters, the pope often addresses pressing global issues such as poverty, climate change, and human rights, and advances an agenda for the Catholic Church moving forward. So not only does he have religious influence, but the Pope also has political influence as well. Oftentimes we think of the Pope religious influence, but his political influence should also be taken into consideration. For example, Pope John Paul II played a significant role in the fall of communism in Eastern Europe. Pope John Paul II was Polish and was the first non-Italian pope elected in over 400 years. He helped play a political role in the fall of communism, which, if you remember, Poland was behind the Iron Curtain, and the Iron Curtain didn't fall until the 90s. However, the Pope played a role in getting political leaders together and tearing down the Iron Curtain. So essentially, the high-ranking Catholic officials are electing from amongst themselves a new leader that's not only going to make spiritual decisions for the Catholic Church, but also will play a role in a political sense as well. So we've been asking this question at the top of the episode of, does the election of the new pope affect non-Catholics? And on the surface, you might think, well, no, it doesn't affect me as someone who's non-Catholic. But I think that the answer to the question is a little more muddy than it might seem. For example, if you live in the U.S. and you don't live in a part of the country that has a large Catholic population, then I think the answer to that question is, well, no, it's probably not going to affect you that much at all. If you do live in a part of the U.S. where there is a large Catholic population, I think the answer can be, then yes, it's going to affect you a little more. Because the ideas of the Pope trickle down the line from the Pope to the cardinals, to the bishops, to the priests, and to the parishes, and so on and so forth. And when the Pope is a leader both spiritually and politically, his thoughts and ideas on issues such as pro-life, LGBTQ+, other human rights issues, then it has an influence on the people that you come in contact with every single day. I mean, we did mention 17% of the world's population is considered Catholic. So if the Pope puts down these different ideas of whatever the social issue might be, it can affect people around you and that you come in contact with, especially if you live in a predominantly Catholic area. Now, what if you live outside of the U.S.? If you live outside of the U.S., maybe you live in a Central or South American country where there is a very large Catholic population, then the election of a new pope, even if you're a non-Catholic, plays a significant role as well. Because if you live in this part of the world or any other country outside of Central or South America that has a large Catholic population, the election of the new pope affects you as well, even if you're someone who is non-Catholic, because his thoughts and ideas affect those people. Let's say even if you live in a part of the world that's not predominantly Catholic, but maybe your neighbor is Catholic, or you work with some people who go to a Catholic church. Well, these thoughts and ideas of the new elected pope trickle down the line and affect the people that you come in contact with. And so maybe their thoughts and ideas are changed a little bit because of the new pope and his agenda that he's trying to put forward. So it can affect you if you're a non-Catholic, but I think it really just depends on the situation that you find yourself in. So what are my personal views of the election of the new pope as a non-Catholic? Well, regardless of who is elected as the new pope, it doesn't change the fact that there's only one way to heaven. You see, the Pope, the Catholic Church considers as the vicar of Christ, the mouthpiece of Christ here on earth. But according to the Bible, we as Christians can go in the throne room of God and talk to him and bring our prayers and our petitions to him. As a pastor of a non-Catholic church, this decision of regardless of who is picked as the next pope does not affect my church whatsoever. So when the new pope is announced, again, at the recording of this podcast, they haven't even started the conclave yet, but by the time of the release, they should have already announced the new pope. That when we have church on Sunday, regardless of who the next pope is, it does not affect my church whatsoever. And if you're a non-Catholic as well, then it's not going to affect your church either. But I go back to the thought of, regardless, if we know a lot of Catholic people, or if we have family members who are Catholic, co-workers who are Catholic, neighbors who are Catholic, or we just live in a predominantly Catholic area of the world, then this decision does affect those around us. And so it might not directly affect us, but it very well could indirectly affect us. So when it seems like the world is more divided now more than ever, both politically and religiously, the world's going to be watching who's the next pope. You can already log on to news websites and see coverage of who the next pope is going to be, who their favorites are, who they think might win, and so on and so forth. I mean, the news organizations all around the world have descended on the Vatican to find out who the next Catholic pope is going to be. And so it's hard to avoid it, but regardless of who they do pick to become the next pope, that doesn't change the fact that there's only one way to heaven, and that is putting your faith and trust in Jesus Christ. See, regardless of when the white smoke comes out of the chimney of the Sistine Chapel, that God is still on the throne. It doesn't matter who they select the next pope to be. It doesn't change the way of salvation, and that is through faith alone in Jesus Christ. As a non-Catholic, it's my view that I can go straight to God, and that I don't have to go through a priest, bishop, cardinal, or pope to ask for forgiveness of sins. Instead, I can go straight to the Lord. But I think we just can't ignore that such a large population of the world is affected by what happens when that white smoke appears. And while it might not directly impact us, it very well could directly impact the people around us. And so when we take that into consideration and we think of the agenda that the Catholic Church is promoting and how that affects people we know who are Catholics, we can better able to witness to them because we understand their thought process. So it's slightly hard to ignore the fact that this is going to affect a large portion of the world's population, hence the coverage that it's going to be getting over the next several days from news organizations. And it will be interesting to find out. There's been plenty of talk of, is it going to be a conservative pope? Is it going to be a more liberal pope? But I am reminded by the verse that talks about it is God who sets up kings. And while we don't see the pope as a king per se, he is a very influential leader for both religion, but also does play that political role. And so when we ask this question, does it affect me? I think in some ways it can, even as a non-Catholic. But again, I do mention that this doesn't change the fact that there's only one way to heaven, and that ultimately we should be looking towards God for religious answers because he is perfect, and not looking to someone like the Pope who is human and is imperfect. But it's also hard to ignore all of these different things that are going on. I mean, as a non-Catholic, I had no idea all of the intricacies of what it takes to elect the new Pope. And so if I didn't know it, I'm sure plenty of you out there didn't as well. And it's fascinating on how they do it and how it's been virtually unchanged over the last 800 years. But you know what hasn't changed in even longer is God. God hasn't changed. In fact, God is the same yesterday, today, forever, and regardless of the new Pope, there's still only one way to heaven. I hope I've given you some stuff to think about as you read the news over the next several days and weeks of the new Pope. But I hope you also remember that there is only one way to heaven, and that is through putting your faith and trust in Jesus Christ. If you found this podcast helpful, I hope you'll leave us a review and a comment on your favorite podcasting app. Again, we're on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, and anywhere else you find your favorite podcast. You can also listen to us on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, Sunday to Society. You can follow us on Instagram at Sunday to Society to be informed on when we drop new episodes and all the latest news, as well as like us on our Facebook page, which is also entitled Sunday to Society. I hope you have a great day, and God bless.